Iwahiko Sumanuma and Agnes Asbury Rockrise. Two equally remarkable people sharing a unique story throughout the early 20th century. While, to paraphrase an entry in Iwahiko's journal, clouds might sweep across their heaven, their love withstood tumultuous times. Two people very much in love, who documented their lives in two very different ways. Iwahiko with succinct diary entries, and Agnes with a romantic flourish, and a manuscript she entitled My Japanese Husband, written after her husband's death. Iwahiko Sumanuma was to become one of America's first Japanese licensed architects, making a life in Manhattan at a time when the vast majority of Japanese immigrants to the United States mainland took up residence in the cities of California, rather than in the bright lights and bustling streets of New York City. Invested in the Japanese business and arts community, which was then confronted by the diminishing waves of the Japanesque art craze sweeping America, Iwahiko set out to make a success of himself. Agnes wrote, he wanted to do big things. Iwahiko Sumanuma was born Hikotaro Sumanuma on June 7, 1878. He was born in Yamagata, Japan, to Sotaro and Naka Sumanuma. Iwahiko was the third of 6 children, and his parents' only son. Agnes was later to note that the birth of a son fulfilled the traditional hope of every Japanese father. As such, Iwahiko had a tremendous responsibility to his father, a design-build contractor and owner of a hardware store. While Iwahiko's family was comfortably affluent for much of his youth, in his late teens, his family's dire financial straits forced Iwahiko to join his father in the workplace. He worked alongside his father for 4 years, until Iwahiko's drastic underbid on a construction project led to his father's business going bankrupt. In shame, Iwahiko left his hometown of Yamagata. He wrote of this experience later, stating, "Finally, father made me to stop my business until I know something more about architecture." Thus, he struck out on his own. Upon his departure from Yamagata, Iwahiko first traveled to Tokyo. He later wrote of this time in his life, "Confidence flowed far away from me, as if no one even trusted me for a dime. Friends were turned into strangers. Relatives became my enemy." He left Japan for China, but was confronted by the chaos of the Boxer Rebellion, a violent uprising that rent China's countryside asunder. To escape the mayhem, Iwahiko traveled to Malaya, Sumatra, and India over the course of 4 years, moving without a defined purpose from one country to the next. In India, Iwahiko studied English and was baptized into the Methodist faith, assuming the English name Thomas S. Rockrise, Rockrise being an approximate English translation of Iwahiko. While there, Iwahiko met a group of American missionaries who sponsored his immigration to the United States. He arrived to the bustling streets of New York City on September 24, 1904. From New York, Iwahiko traveled to Akron, Ohio, in order to attend Bucknell Academy. While there, Iwahiko lived with the family of a Bucknell Academy teacher, Professor Joseph C. Rockwell. Iwahiko attended Bucknell Academy for 2 years, graduating in 1907. He then entered Bucknell College, subsequently known as Akron University. Iwahiko left Bucknell College after a year and traveled back to New York, where he was admitted to Syracuse University on September 29, 1908. While there, Iwahiko enrolled in the architecture program, determined to make his parents proud. He became active on campus, becoming a member of the Cosmopolitan Club at Syracuse University. He was trained in the Beaux-Arts architectural style, a style heavy on classical features and ornate ornamentation. Iwahiko's academic prowess was recognized by election to the university's Honors Society. Upon his graduation in June of 1912, Iwahiko was recognized as the class marshal and was awarded the Luther Gifford Prize for maintaining the highest GPA upon graduation. However, making ends meet was tough at Syracuse, so Iwahiko took on summer employment in order to support his architectural endeavors financially, becoming the temporary proprietor of the Nippon Bazaar, a shop selling imported Japanese curios in Sea Isle City, New Jersey. Sadly, Iwahiko's father passed away before Iwahiko could return to Japan in the wake of his academic success at Syracuse. Although Iwahiko had clearly planned to return to his hometown of Yamagata after graduation, his college thesis project was, after all, entitled A Parliament Building for the Japanese Government. He ultimately chose to remain in the United States. Iwahiko headed to New York City after refusing a professorship in the Midwest to become a draftsman and an apprentice architect. Iwahiko was ready to begin his architectural career. Iwahiko's ambitions and work ethic were boundless. From 1913 through 1914, Iwahiko worked on the J.P. Morgan building on Wall Street, which still stands to this day. Iwahiko did this work with the firm of Trowbridge and Livingston. As he began to take on projects in which he was the lead architect, the Japanisme art craze again reared its head. Under the auspices of the firm Murphy & Dana, Iwahiko was responsible for designing the future country home of Japanophile Robert Barrett in Cornish, New Hampshire. As an architect of Japanese ancestry, Iwahiko was pigeonholed as an architect uniquely suited to design authentically Japanese buildings. After 3 years of architectural apprenticeships, Iwahiko received his New York architectural license on December 1st, 1916. After a long effort, he had finally achieved his dream of becoming a professional architect. On April 4th, 1915, Iwahiko met Agnes Margaret Asbury, the woman who was to be the love of Iwahiko's life. Agnes was a young Brooklynite with an enthusiasm for Japanese art. Her father, Francis Asbury, was an English immigrant who manufactured glass shopfront signs in Manhattan. Her mother was Tennessee Asbury. Agnes grew up in Brooklyn, simply moving between brick-fronted buildings throughout her childhood and adolescence. As a rebellious young woman, she decided to work as a nurse, However, she found the work quickly to be a little too disturbing for her taste. Therefore, she followed up on her passion for Japanese artwork and took on a job with friends of Iwahiko's, much to her parents', or at least her father's, disapproval. Agnes was employed by the Ashiwaras. Mrs. Ashiwara was to become one of Agnes's closest friends. Indeed, Agnes wrote later of the Ashiwaras, they had come to assume an almost parental responsibility for our future. Iwahiko recorded meeting Agnes in his diary, noting, met Miss Asbury of 1435 56th Street, Brooklyn. Just 1 month later, he wrote in his diary that he gave her a ring. They were, according to Agnes, blissfully happy. Days and weeks slipped by, and our happiness unfolded like a lovely blossom. Their happiness was multiplied when they had a son. Iwahiko's tender focus on his son and his wife is readily apparent when looking through his diaries. While Iwahiko was consistently a faithful diarist, the day of, and the days following, his son's birth are blank. Clearly, his preoccupation with his new baby knew no bounds. Agnes and Iwahiko named their son George and nicknamed him Gigi. Agnes later wrote that Iwahiko was as one who felt himself singled out by heaven for some special distinction among men. Such pride was his as he discussed the future of his unborn son. After his son's birth, Iwahiko's diary entries slowly drift away from being focused on business and social engagements to detailing every single aspect of his growing son's life. 1916 was an extraordinary year for the Sumanuma rock rises. In Iwahiko's diary, he wrote, "May 1917 be as happy and sweet in memory as 1916, a beautiful year of married life." Agnes also remembered this time later, writing, "Winter had gone its lonely way, and up came spring, all smiles and promises. Life was very wonderful. My husband loved me devotedly, we had our precious son, our comfortable little apartment. My happiness was complete." Not so with Iwahiko. He was happy too, of course, but in a different way. The happiness I had achieved, in itself a goal, was for him only a beginning, a stepping stone. Professional success began to dawn on Iwahiko's immediate horizon, facilitated in part by Dr. Jokichi Takamine, the founder of the Nippon Club, an association of Japanese businessmen in New York, and by Mr. Dejiro Ushikubo. Mr. Ushikubo owned the prestigious Japanese art galleries of Yamanaka and Company, and Iwahiko, alongside his newfound architectural partner, Takeo Shiota, received the commission to design the interiors of the galleries. Agnes wrote that the building was essentially Japanese in design and feeling, and was a most fitting background for the priceless treasures displayed. According to Agnes, Mr. Ushikubo was delighted with the beautiful work undertaken by Iwahiko and Takeo Shiota, and recommended their services to the travelogue maven, Burton Holmes. Burton Holmes is now mostly known as the purported inventor of the travelogue genre. He traveled across the world, bringing snippets of supposedly foreign and exotic cultures back home to the United States. America was still in the throes of an artistic architectural fever known as Japanism, a thirst for all things deemed Japanese and subsequently exotic, regardless of actual authenticity. Appropriation of Japanese culture was all the rage in America, and Burton Holmes, who had filmed in Japan just months before, was keen to get in on the fad. Agnes wrote that Burton Holmes wished to have the interior of his then unfinished duplex apartment designed in authentic Japanese style. There is nothing authentic about the Japanese excess pictured in the apartment, but the contract on the Burton Holmes apartment bolstered Iwahiko's professional reputation, leading him to wonder about moving beyond the strictures of an American architectural market. One can only wonder if working in the kitschy style demanded by Burton Holmes spurred Iwahiko's interest in taking his work abroad to his homeland of Japan. Agnes was taken aback by Iwahiko's sudden expression of his desire to travel back to Japan, leaving her and George alone for 6 months. She wrote later, "While I had always known that the idea was at the back of his head, I had been putting it from me. Perhaps he would change his mind." The idea of her husband being 8,000 miles away was dismaying, prompting Iwahiko to explain his rationale to her. Agnes wrote later, "It was then that he explained painstakingly that only by taking this step could he hope to make a place for himself in the profession. He wanted to do big things. He firmly believed a future awaited him in Japan. That native born and with the advantage of his Western training and ideas, he felt that he would be a more useful man. Yet as he talked on, flushed and happy by the vision of this future he so confidently pictured, he took full well account of the risk he would run." Iwahiko took on several architectural projects in Asia, ultimately traveling there not once, but twice, taking on American architect John Thompson as a partner. His work ranged from the Kawasaki Hospital, the Yonaka House in Tokyo, a private museum, and an office building in Nanying, Shanghai, China. Iwahiko's career had never looked more promising. Iwahiko and Agnes were able to move out of their apartment with their son to a house of their very own in Flushing, New York. However, not all was well. Agnes wrote, "And yet with all this contentment, there was an undercurrent of fear. It concerned Iwahiko." By August of 1922, Iwahiko was clearly very ill. After a mistaken diagnosis of bronchitis, he was finally diagnosed with tuberculosis. It is difficult to overstate how terrifying this diagnosis must have been.
broad land of ours, a bit of war is being fought against tuberculosis. Able warriors armed with modern weapons are on the firing line. How goes the battle? Come with me on a journey and let's see what is being done. Let's have a look at one of these sanatoria, or tuberculosis hospitals as they are called today. Real hospitals for the tuberculous, and not merely resting places. Here we are in a large southern sanatorium. This one has beds for 500 patients. Altogether, there are now 90,000 such beds available. Rest and more rest, as Trudeau discovered when he himself took the cure as a young doctor. Yes, and good food. Nowadays, doctors don't stuff patients with more milk and eggs than they can digest. Just good, well-balanced meals, enough to gain weight on. Smell those delicious loaves. New ways of resting the lung have been developed. This patient is getting pneumothorax treatment. Air is let into the chest cavity, and that rests the lung so that it can heal. When the diseased lung is fully healed, it is allowed to expand again. A lifesaver for many. Each patient is helped to find his place in the workaday world when he leaves the sanatorium. Here's a class in typewriting. In this sanatorium, as in many others, children of tuberculous parents who cannot be properly protected otherwise are cared for in a special department of the sanatorium.
Iwihiko began a rest cure at Saranac Lake in New York. Agnes wrote of Saranac, the older men, business and professional men, mothers of families, these took their cure seriously, pitifully so. Constantly, their minds rebounded back and forth, to home, to office, to home, and back again. They must get well. Iwihiko was undoubtedly of this group. Separated from his family and isolated on fresh air porches, he took to drawing and reading Japanese poetry to pass the time. Eventually, the family separation proved too painful to bear, and the family was reunited at Saranac Lake. Money was extremely tight, but Iwihiko and Agnes and George were together. Iwihiko worked to keep up his professional reputation, maintaining a steady correspondence with fellow architects, but sadly, he never recovered his health. After Iwihiko's death in 1936, Agnes began to write the story of her and Iwihiko's lives together. She called this work My Japanese Husband. Agnes noted that Iwihiko always wished to write his own autobiography. She wrote, "With returning strength came reawakened desire to write. He had my hearty approval. It would bear the stamp of sincerity without a doubt." Like Iwihiko's own work, Agnes's writings bear the stamp of sincerity. Her true love for her husband shines through each word.
You made me love you. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. You made me want to. And all the time you knew it. I guess you always knew it. You made me happy sometimes. You made me glad. but there were times, baby, you made me feel so bad. You made me cry for. I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to tell you. I want some love, that's true. Yes, I do, indeed I do. You know I do. Gimme, 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 gimme what I cry for. You know you got the kind of kisses that I die for. You know you made me